What is going on, Fight Feeders? Welcome back to Fight Feed. Today, I am going to be giving you guys my entire breakdown of the UFC 323 pay-per-view card that just happened last night. This is not only a historic card for several reasons, but one of the main reasons, this is the last card that we are going to have to see on ESPN pay-per-view, which, guys, I think that I have to give some credit to ESPN because the reason that I actually got fully invested into MMA again was when this whole merger happened with ESPN. I remember in 2019, that is when, I actually personally started watching, and ever since the John Jones UFC 239 fight where Ben Askren got KO'd by Jorge, I have not missed one UFC card, so I do have to thank ESPN for that, but I am very excited to not have to deal with that app anymore. Very excited for Paramount Plus, but UFC 323 was an absolute banger, as a little banger of a ting, as I like to say. It was a perfect card from start to finish, in my opinion. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to break down each fight, starting at the very first fight of the card all the way through the last fight. And what I'm going to try to do, guys, I do have images of the actual stats and things of that nature from the UFC website, but what I'm going to do my best to do is just kind of outline things from memory that I recall happening in the fight and give you guys my overall take and breakdown. Lots of crazy things happen on this card, some crazy referee instances, some crazy finishes. We got one of the most technical bar fights that I think anybody has ever seen in the octagon, and that was in our Ewo versus Ebo fight, which ended up being an absolute slugfest. And then we've got two new champions at the helm in the flyweight and bantamweight divisions, respectively. So lots to go through here. I would love for you guys to just give this video a quick like if you can before we dive in. Also, comment below, what was your favorite fight on this fight card? I would truly love to hear from you guys regarding your favorite fight. I believe my favorite fight overall, gosh, it's a tough one. It is a tough one. I'd have to say, even though it only lasted about a minute, it was probably the Ewo versus Ebo. I think that fight ended up being just absolute mayhem from start to finish. But then we've also got the Chris Duncan versus Terrance McKinney, which was also an absolute war for as long as it lasted. And then you cannot forget Ziam. What a stellar performance from him. And I also thought Maycee Barber looked really good. So lots of fun ones. I'd say Ewo versus Ebo's gotta be my favorite. Let's go ahead and dive into the full recap, starting with fight number one, which is Mairon Santos versus Muhammad Naimov, presented by Monster. Guys, before I dive in, I've always been curious, like when the fighters have the Monster can in their hand, I don't know if it's an empty can or not, or like if they actually have Monster in it. I wonder if you guys have ever thought the same thing. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive into the first fight. So you got Muhammad Naimov versus Mairon Santos. So guys, if you watched my picks video, I went with Muhammad Naimov here because I feel he's had this uncanny ability to knock off prospects, especially in this division. Got Khan Offley, even though he was not as much of a prospect as Mairon Santos, but previously he's also gotten Bogdan Grad. So he's definitely had some of those performances where he's been able to knock off these hot up-and-coming prospects from the UFC. But in this fight, guys, it looked as though Muhammad Naimov was just a step behind from the get-go. So he usually, I think, fights in the orthodox stance, but was consistently kind of being pushed into the southpaw stance because Mairon Santos was landing some heavy leg kicks. Muhammad Naimov, I think, started off decently, getting his offense going, especially with his calf kicks. But Mairon Santos, guys, just looked a lot bigger in there, just taller, and just looks like he could be in a different weight class compared to that of Muhammad Naimov. Mairon Santos, I think, started off a little bit slow, but then suddenly, he started really piecing together his 1-2 combos, and he did clip Muhammad Naimov, gave him a little bit of the jelly dance in the first round, and basically what ends up happening from the first round all the way until the finish is Muhammad Naimov just does his best to try to land the best that he can. But really what I would say is what I noticed from Muhammad Naimov is he just was very gun shy in this fight. Like he was kind of only throwing the jab out there, and Mairon Santos kind of just started laying it on, landing some combos, and I just think that Mairon Santos, although, we have to call it, he did miss weight. So he didn't get a full weight cut in for this fight, which I think, begs the question of could that play into the fact that he was just, much more powerful, less famished, all these different things. But I got to say, I did not pick Myron Santos because in previous fights, guys, like when he fought Francis Marshall, I thought Francis Marshall actually should have got the nod there. He got a knockdown over Myron Santos and just seemed to be in control of that fight from start to finish, but Myron got the win there. And that is, I think, a big reason why I didn't go that way, because I felt like, Naimov has a similar skill set to Francis Marshall where he can strike but also has that strong grappling background. But Myron Santos proved me wrong. I'm a believer now. He just controlled this fight from start to finish, and it really, what he ends up doing in round 3, if I recall correctly, just lands a nice crispy 1-2 that lands on the chin of Muhammad Naimov and sets him down, and then he lands a couple ground and pound shots, and that is all she wrote. So it's a huge win for Myron Santos. Shout out to Myron Santos, but hopefully he can, dial it back in and make weight in his next one. Still a big win nonetheless, and that is a great way to kick off our first fight of the night. Fight number 2 on the card, we got Mansur Abdul-Malik versus Antonio Trocolli. Now, guys, shout out to Antonio Trocolli, 35th birthday yesterday. He chose to get locked inside of an octagon on his birthday, so that takes a different type of balls if you ask me. But, guys, honestly, going out there, I kind of anticipated this result, not the submission finish, but I did anticipate Mansur Abdul-Malik getting some sort of finish. I believe I wanted it, or not wanted, but I thought that he would get a KO in first round. These guys kind of go out there off the bat. Mansur Abdul-Malik is very aggressive in this one. Not as aggressive as more aggressive than he's been in other fights from my memory anyway. I feel like he went out there and just off the rip was looking to land a big shot on Antonio Trocolli. But what ends up happening here is, he throws a big shot. Trocolli's trying to stay on the outside, obviously with his 6'5" and very long reach, trying to stay on the outside. But Mansur Abdul-Malik throws a couple shots that I think connect glancingly and gets them into sort of a grappling situation that drops them to the ground. Mansur Abdul-Malik kind of is just, controlling Antonio Trocolli on the ground for the most part. And then suddenly he gets Antonio Trocolli into a situation where he has to kind of scramble up, and Trocolli leaves his neck wide open for the taking. Mansur Abdul-Malik pulls a Trayshawn Gore and just cinches up a nice slick guillotine as Antonio Trocolli's kind of on one knee on his way up. And Mansur Abdul-Malik lifts this man up to his feet with this guillotine, and instantly Trocolli is tapping out. He's tapping the ass of Mansur Abdul-Malik because he is getting his fucking neck wringed out like a goddamn wet rag. And Mansur Abdul-Malik gets a dominant finish in round 1. Not the best birthday present for Antonio Trocolli, but he did probably get a nice little paycheck there, so shout out to him. But a great win for Mansur Abdul-Malik. And guys, I do feel like Mansur Abdul-Malik and Myron Santos both have this thing about them where they're very good fighters, but there's just certain times where I think they show holes, and it's kind of had me thinking like at some point they're going to get, I don't want to use the term fraud check, but I just feel like at some point they're going to meet an immovable object, right, that is going to give them issues, and I could see them losing. But what I will say is, while I've had that feeling, both Mansur Abdul-Malik and Myron Santos in these fights didn't show any of those holes, in my opinion. They actually just proved to show that they're world beaters in some case. And so it's hard to say if I still feel that way. It could be that still happens as they, go up the rankings and things of that nature. But overall, both men showed out yesterday for UFC 323. So a big win for Mansur Abdul-Malik, and Antonio Trocolli, 3-fight losing streak in the UFC, just has yet to find any success here in the UFC. So we'll see what happens with him. But overall, I think it was a solid fight for as long as it lasted. Okay, guys, fight number 3. Now this one is the banger of a ting, if you know what I'm saying. Iwo Baraniewski versus Ibo Aslan. Iwo versus Ibo. And guys, I picked Iwo Baraniewski because I felt, based on what I saw on Contender Series, how he went out there and knocked out a guy who the commentators would not stop gassing up, lands an overhand right in like the first exchange and just starches his opponent out cold. He definitely showed off a one-shot type of power. And Ibo Aslan, obviously very talented in his own right, a 100% KO rate. Not even just a finishing rate, but 100% finishing rate by way of KO. So he's dangerous, but what Ibo Aslan's kind of shown me in the last few fights prior to this one, sometimes he has this tendency to be very gun-shy and just kind of let the fight slip away from him. And what I was worried about there is not only is Baraniewski a guy who, he has less fights as a pro, but he is a guy who is always kind of a fast starter and looks to, land damage or get his opponents into a precarious position on the ground. And because Aslan, a majority of his losses prior to this, 0 times has he been KO'd in his career prior to this, he has gotten choked out or submitted. And so what I was worried about there is that Baraniewski actually had, if you look at his record, I believe he had an even amount of KOs and submissions. He has a 100% finish rate in his own right. And what do you know, guys? These guys go out there and kind of off the bat, obviously, Aslan showing off that longer reach in height, and he's kind of staying on the outside, but he is walking him down at first. And Baraniewski's got fast, slick footwork, but it's kind of them going back and forth a little bit until it reaches the 4 minute and 20-second mark or 22-second mark of round 1, and what I mean by that, 40 seconds in, not 4 minutes in, but 40 seconds into the fight, that is when all fucking hell breaks loose. These two start trading. They get into like a bit of a clinching situation where they both land and hurt each other, but lands a big shot and drops to his knee. Gets back up. Then clips Baraniewski as he's trying to, maneuver his way into the pocket and hurts him. Baraniewski, I think, gets dropped there. He gets back up. He's kind of on wobbly legs, gets up against the cage. He is trying his best to just dodge. And Aslan, guys, the thing you got to appreciate is that he comes with murderous intentions with his hands, right? He, at this point, as he's got against the cage, he is drunken kung fu. He is throwing every punch he can, and there is zero of this going on, right? He is not throwing straights and pulling his hands back. He is straight just throwing every shot he can. He's landing a lot, but Baraniewski's doing a good job of kind of rolling with these shots against the cage. Then as Ebo's kind of just unloading these punches, throws I think it was either a lead or a right hook, and catches drops him somehow, and then he starts punching on the ground. Gets back up. They're exchanging again. Cracks Ewo gets hurt again. He falls back against the cage. Same shit again. Just starts unleashing hell on him, not really being cognizant of his own defense. And so what ends up happening then is then lands another big shot and drops to the ground. And then he just gets a couple of these pop shots onto the chin, but he ends up putting out cold there. And gets the KO win here. So I think this lasted about 1 minute and 40 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. What a 1 minute and 40 seconds it was. What a fun fight. I mean, the commentators were going nuts. DC was screaming. This was probably one of the best fights we've seen, even though it lasted only, 2 minutes. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both of these guys got bonuses here, as they should. And now that brings me to something I want to bring up. The bonuses for this card are pretty bullshit, but I will say it sounds like the UFC's kind of doing their under the table bonus thing where they're giving other fighters bonuses, just not maybe documenting it for all of us to know. But I think it was this fight they got fight of the night, and then it was either this fight they got fight of the night or another fight. Let me just see here. Fight of the night was Pewter. Manuel Torres got a performance of the night. Got a performance of the night. That's unfortunate, guys, because although did lose, I feel like they should be giving him a bit of a bonus there. Also, Jalen Turner, where's his bonus? You know what I mean? Like some of these big finishes. And this is why, guys, I've said in the past, I want the UFC to get away from this whole knockout of the night and then performance of the night. I want them to get away from that. And what I would like to see them do, I think you should still have a fight of the night and maybe a performance of the night. Give it to one person, but I think that there should be a bonus for any fighter who basically goes out on their shield, right? And I know that might sound stupid, but Aslan, he stayed in there, and him and Henry Cejudo, right? They both stayed in there while getting hurt, trying to do their best and their darndest. And you want to see that kind of get rewarded, right? Because they could have just kind of cowered away and shied away from the fight, but they stayed in there and went out on their shield. So that could be a cool thing. But I also would like to see just the UFC adopt a practice of, hey, if you get a finish, you're getting an extra, whatever it is, 15K, 20K, 25K. Every finish should just get a bonus, in my opinion, because how do you, every finish is subjective, right? Obviously, there's some where you're like, okay, that was a way more dominant finish than this one, but I feel like it's unfair to try to rate against each other. Instead, just give each of them their kudos, right? So I feel like they should move to that approach if they can, but who the fuck am I, right? Fight number 4, we got Edson Barboza versus Jalin Turner. Jalin Turner unretiring as he should because, well, as you guys could see in this fight, I think he showed off those skills, right? I will say, very shocked to see, Edson was landing some big shots, especially a very big overhand right on Jalin Turner at the start of the round. And I was like, oh shit, like, could Jalin Turner get knocked out here? But then suddenly Jalin Turner lands a vicious elbow that cuts open Edson Barboza and has him bleeding all over the place. And guys, the reason I ended up picking Jalin Turner in this matchup is I kind of took my notes from Edson's last matchup where he fought Drakkar Klose. And guys, Drakkar Klose is not a KO puncher. He was almost knocking Edson Barboza out several times in that matchup. And so when I look at that, I just think that Edson Barboza has too much mileage on the tank. And I'm like, as a 39-year-old going up against a Jalin Turner who's a sniper on the feet, I did not think he would be able to get out of the octagon without being put unconscious. And I ended up being correct there, right? Because he's just taken so much damage. And Jalin Turner is not a guy that you can just kind of slip through the cracks with, right? He is a guy, if he lands a big shot, he could put you down expeditiously. And I feel like that is what happened. So he lands that elbow, cuts open Edson. And then we got to see Jalin Turner really put on a clinical performance where he's walking Edson down. Edson's kind of that wounded animal. And Jalin Turner is not shying away from it. And instead, he's actually locked in, patient, still being very cognizant about his guard, right? As he got Edson against the cage, if you guys will go back and watch it, Jalin Turner was very good about keeping that guard high so that he didn't get caught with some nonsense and, let the fight slip through the cracks for him. He ends up finding, a couple of nice crispy shots. He drops Edson twice, and finally the ref steps in and stops it as he should. Very big win and comeback performance from Jalin Turner. Very emotional after, so a well-deserved victory for him. He really showed off his skill sets here, and you got to love Edson Barboza, one of those legends in the UFC. But I do think it's probably time for him to call it a career, hoping that he can figure it out. But nonetheless, a fun and exciting matchup from Jalin Turner, and he gets it done over Edson Barboza. Fight number 5, we've got Marvin Vettori versus Brunno Ferreira. This one was also a fun matchup, guys. I swear, Marvin Vettori might be the one fighter where, we've all seen like the legendary chins of the sport get cracked at some point. Even Max Holloway, right, who had never even been knocked down. Well, he did get knocked down by Justin Gaethje, but we all know how the UFC scores that. But we've seen the legendary chins of this sport break at some point, but I believe Marvin Vettori may be the only fighter where that legendary granite Italian chin just somehow might never be cracked fully. He got hammered by Brunno Ferreira pretty early on, especially in round 1. I think round 1, Brunno Ferreira was showing off those big bombs, the big power. I was worried, and I was tweeting about this. By the way, guys, if you are on X, I would love for you guys to just give me a follow there, because that is actually where I've been doing like my live fight notes. So I kind of tweet probably too much throughout each fight, but as the fights are going, I'm kind of, tweeting my thoughts, right? And one thing I tweeted about was that I feel like although Brunno was landing with some big mustard in that fight, especially round 1, I was worried about the amount of times he was trying to land a kill shot, especially against Marvin Vettori, knowing Marvin Vettori is not an easy guy to go out there and finish. I was worried that Brunno Ferreira was going to gas himself out, especially after a pretty egregious weight miss from his side of things. So anyways, I think Marvin was kind of showing off that slick southpaw boxing. He was keeping the volume going in the first couple rounds and landing some shots on Brunno. And overall, it was a solid performance, I think, from both guys. But I think Brunno Ferreira just proved to be the more powerful, more hungry for the finish type of fighter in here. At one point, Marvin did hurt Brunno at the end of the fight in round 3, but kind of just let Brunno get his wits about him, especially with the last minute remaining. You would like to see Marvin really press the gas a little bit more there, but nonetheless, I think it was a very fun fight. I think Marvin Vettori is unfortunately he's in a a tough spot right now. I think he's now got a 3 or 4 fight losing streak, so it's going to be tough to see where he goes next. But people forget Marvin has, although 32 years old, I believe, 31 or 32, he has a lot of miles in the UFC. Like he's been in the UFC for years now, a former title challenger against Israel Adesanya back in 2021. So he's kind of been in there with the best of the best. And this is a good test for Brunno Ferreira, and I think he did very well and was able to get that unanimous decision victory. Did his best to finish, but overall, Murray's granite chin stays alive for another round here, and we'll see what happens in their next fights. But overall, a fun fight from these guys. Fight number 6, guys, Nazim Sadykhov versus Ziam. And so at this point of the card, guys, 0-1, 1-1, 2-1, 3-1, 4-1. At this point in the card, I'm 4-1 on picks. My first one being wrong was the very first fight where I picked Muhammad Naimov, but this fight I picked Nazim Sadykhov, and boy, did I get this one wrong, guys. Ferreira came out, and one thing that you gotta appreciate some of the commentating on is I don't know who said it, but whoever said it said this is a guy in Ferreira who continues, it's probably DC, continues to show levels when he gets back in the octagon. From his last performance to now, like every time we see him get in there, he just continues to show more layers that he's been improving and just getting better with. And guys, he had a virtuoso type performance in this matchup. From start to finish, pillar to post, he was on Nazim Sadykhov, like to open the fight up as they get up against the cage. He throws a huge body knee, and then things get into the ground. Ferreira just smothers Nazim Sadykhov in the first round with grappling and just holds him and is going for submissions, but completely smothers him, which is something I was surprised by, given that Sadykhov does have a background, working with Ray Longo and Matt Serra. I was thinking that he could have potentially the better like defensive or even offensive jiu-jitsu on the ground, but Ferreira proves that to not be the case. He gets Nazim's back and just kind of holds him, almost gets a submission off a couple times in round 1. Round 2, they go back out, and Ferreira just is tagging Nazim with all kinds of shots, guys. Like he is just all over Nazim. Nazim looks not only battered, but at one point, he gets hurt pretty badly, and then finally, at the end of where we end the fight, Ferreira lands a brutal elbow that just drops Nazim to the ground, and then he starts landing some ground and pound, and that is all she wrote. The fight gets called off at the very end of round 2, so the bell rings and Jason Herzog waves his hands off. Now, Aljo was getting shit on Twitter or X because he was saying that they should have let him, go back to the stool and come back for round 3. And I do think that it was probably a solid stoppage because Nazim was even having trouble standing up after Ferreira just beat the brakes off him at the end of round 2. But I do see where Aljo's coming from, especially because Nazim is that type of fighter where, you're going to have to put this guy out cold if you want him to stop. And I think that from Aljo's point of view, Nazim would have had about a minute of recovery there where, he could recover, but I do feel like at the end of the day, the fight result is likely to be the same, even if he gets that minute of recovery, because Ferreira was just switched on, and really there were no moments in this fight, guys, where I think Nazim Sadykhov had Ferreira in any sort of danger whatsoever. Ferreira just looked fantastic, guys. I don't think I can ever pick against him again at this rate. So very good performance from him. I am going to do a breakdown this week, guys, like a play-by-play. It's going to be a new series I'm going to do. Now, unfortunately, guys, you haven't seen a lot of breakdowns from me lately of like fight footage breakdowns because I've been having trouble where when I post those, the UFC tries to copyright things. And so I have to be very careful about what I show. So I think the play-by-play is going to be more of like an image-based thing, but kind of going over the different moments of the fight. But I do want to make a play-by-play of this one because Ferreira going up against Sadykhov, who was undefeated in the UFC, I think undefeated as a pro as well. I feel like this performance is one that people are going to sleep on, and I want to make sure I can give Ferreira the flowers he deserves. So a fantastic performance from him, and I am just want to say shout out to Nazim Sadykhov, one of my favorite fighters. Respect to him, and he'll be back. He'll be back very soon, I'm sure. Fight number 7, we've got Maycee Barber versus Karine Silva. So this fight actually ended up being a super fun scrap, even though, a lot of people want to shit on women's MMA. I thought that this was a fun scrap. Maycee Barber's out there sounding like Link from Zelda when she throws her strikes, and Karine Silva. I think at first these two were kind of back and forth, staying pretty consistent. It was kind of hard to say like in the first round who had the overall like better performance off the rip, but what we end up seeing in this fight that I am not a fan of is two blatant fouls, really three fouls that I saw, but two times Karine Silva was, kicked Maycee Barber while she was grounded, and the second one being a very like a flat foot kick right to the chin that Mark Smith ends up saying is a glancing blow, which, look, guys, Mark Smith is one of the best in the business. Not to steal from Jason Herzog, but Mark Smith is a great referee. I feel like he needs to do his best. Like, he's done this in a couple fights, right? So when the Waldo Cortez Acosta fight versus Ante Delija, Cortez Acosta gets that glancing, eye scrape from Delija. Mark Smith, we hear him say, I see punches, right? So there's that. And then now in this one, he says it was just a glancing blow. I think Mark Smith needs to really wait to watch replays before he says stuff, because now he just looks like an asshat, and it's not necessarily his fault. I think in the moment, right? Like, he can't tell, but just wait till you see the replay, because if he would have watched the replay, which I'm happy that whoever came in the octagon said it was not a glancing blow, it was a flush kick to the jaw. Like, because it was an and we saw Maycee Barber stand up and like stumble because like she was like dizzy from, getting kicked right in the chin. And guys, this is something that is very frustrating for me, and I was tweeting about this too. At what point are the referees going to stop with this like pansy-ass approach of warning fighters several times? Like, if a fighter grabs the cage, take a point. I am sick and tired. I don't care who it is. If they grab the cage, take a point. At this point, I think even casual fans of the UFC understand the rule set and understand that a fence grab is a foul. For instance, or in addition to that, we also know that kicking a grounded opponent is an absolute foul. Why are you giving warnings to fighters who train and do this for a living, who know the rules? Why are you giving them, like, there were 3 warnings, and actually Karine Silva didn't even get a warning when she actually grabbed the cage egregiously, and Maycee Barber still got the takedown. But one thing that really ticked me off, guys, is Maycee gets kicked in the face while she's in a dominant position on the ground. She's in top control on Karine Silva. Silva kicks her in the jaw, which allows Karine Silva to stand up. Mark Smith stops the action, says it's a glancing blow, but then realizes it's not. And somehow, when they restart the fight, Mark Smith has them restart the fight from standing, not giving Maycee Barber back the position she literally lost over Karine throwing an illegal blow. So I just think that refereeing was just, not good. But Maycee Barber, guys, looked really strong here. I think Karine Silva had moments of success, but overall, I think Maycee Barber just was more vicious on the feet. Definitely very solid in the ground as well. I think really what Maycee showed off that I think was much better than Karine too is not only that determination, but she just had a better gas tank. Like, I think Karine Silva was getting, wilted as the fight went on, and Maycee Barber just proved to be the overall better fighter. Even with the fouls, she just proved to be the better fighter, in my opinion. So shout out to Maycee Barber. What a big win for her. I know it was probably hard for her, especially given everything that she's been going through, especially with like the Blanchfield matchup that fell out as the fight was going to start. So shout out to Maycee Barber. Glad she's back in the win column here. Got a big win over a talented prospect in Karine Silva. Fight number 8, guys. This is a Terrance McKinney classic where Terrance McKinney, Chris Duncan, they go out and Terrance McKinney off the rip lands a knee right to the chin of Chris Duncan. And then he's just got a crazy flurry, landing body knees, landing shots up top. Like, he's hurting Chris Duncan expeditiously in this first round. And one thing that was really interesting is like me and Riss, my girlfriend, are watching this. Terrance is just landing. And we're like, holy shit, could he finish him? And then I was telling my girlfriend, I'm like, dude, Terrance McKinney, like, there were a couple exchanges off the rip where he's got Chris hurt, but Chris is not down. Chris is kind of standing there, just, juking and jiving, trying to pick his time to land his own shots. And after about like the second or third time where Terrance is just going for the kill, I had said to Marissa, like, hey, Terrance McKinney has this tendency to like go super hard for a finish, but then get caught. And then suddenly Chris Duncan lands like a hard right hand where you see Terrance like freeze up. And like, it was so funny because Marissa's like, oh my God, Terrance is going to get KO'd. She's like, Terrance is going to get KO'd. And then what do you know? Like, right after that, Terrance throws another flurry. Chris kind of gets clinch control, gets Terrance against the back against the cage, throws that elbow that we saw him land about 1,000,000 times on Mateusz Raumbecki on the chin of Terrance McKinney and drops him. And from there, guys, I knew that this was all over for Terrance McKinney. Terrance McKinney is one of the most fun and electric fighters that we've seen in the UFC. But guys, the way he is, it's like he's either the dominant hammer or the nail, right? Like there's no other way around it. Like he's never gone to a decision, at least, especially in the UFC. Chris Duncan, though, just shows off that grit, that determination, hung in there, ate everything Terrance had, made Terrance eat what he could throw, and then he finds that Darce and chokes him out. What a fucking huge win from Chris Duncan, guys. I picked Chris Duncan to get it done, and that is what happened here. So I think at this point, that put me at 6-2 on the card, if I'm not mistaken. But Chris Duncan, huge win for him. Terrance McKinney doesn't lose any stock. I think this is just, Terrance McKinney is always going to be in a fun fight. So you have to appreciate and respect that. I just would like to see Terrance be a bit more cognizant in those finishing moments, right? But still made it a super entertaining fight while it lasted. Now, one thing that's crazy, I think Chris Duncan said he weighed in at 188 pounds before entering the cage. So what the fuck, man? That is a crazy amount of weight that he gained over the course of a day. So that is nuts. But what a big win from Chris Duncan. Shout out to Chris Duncan. Fight number 9, we got Grant Dawson versus Manuel Torres. So guys, in this fight, I picked Manuel Torres because I felt like, and guys, Manuel Torres is one of my favorite lightweight fighters, one of the most brutal finishers, especially if you go back and watch that elbow KO that he got over Nicholas Mata, one of the most brutal elbows I've ever seen landed in a UFC fight. I felt Manuel Torres just has that type of power where if he lands flush on Grant Dawson, he's going to put him out. But guys, Grant Dawson, the grappler, he came out and he was letting them hands fly. Like he was landing a lot of shots on Manuel Torres, but the whole time while he was landing those shots, and then he would try a couple takedowns, we saw some really good sprawls from Manuel Torres. And ultimately, guys, what I kind of said to myself while watching this was, although Grant is being very good about kind of landing his own shots, landing a big overhand, landing some shots on the way in, I'm like, guys, the way Manuel looked, he was just patient, silent killer, waiting for that moment. And once he found that opening, he lands a big shot on Grant Dawson, drops him down, and then he lands some ground and pound to finish it off. Huge win for Manuel Torres. We're going to see him now at the very tail end of the rankings, I believe, in lightweight. So well-deserved and huge win from him. But still, I want to shout out to Grant Dawson because this guy has so much humility. If you guys watch his pre-fight speeches, his pre-fight press conference, he's very humble and understanding of, like, even when he was talking about his ranking, he's like, none of the guys in the top 15 want to fight me because, like, I'm not a big name, and he's like, I'm a tough fight at the same time. So he's like, I can understand it. So you gotta love that he has that ability to, like, be self-aware. But what a big win for Manuel Torres, getting over a guy who's only got a couple losses in his professional career and about 25 professional fights. So huge win for Manuel Torres. Shout out to Manuel. Fight number 10, guys. We're now into the main card. So just, guys, do me a favor. Drop a like. Hype this up. Do whatever you can. I'm going to start doing more fight night recaps. I haven't been doing these as much because I feel like, for whatever reason, when I've done them, I haven't seen too much success there. And it could just be that, everyone, there's so many other creators that make them. So I would love any feedback you guys have. But diving into this one, we had Jan Blachowicz, the legend and former champion, versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, what a matchup this was. I did not pick Jan in this one. I picked Bogdan, and the reason I picked Bogdan is because I feel like at some point, although Jan Blachowicz is such a talented fighter and some of the strongest leg kicks and the best leg kicks that we've seen in the UFC, I just feel like at 42 years old, the age is going to catch up at some point, right? And what I felt like, especially from an age perspective, Jan doesn't show really any signs of aging, guys, outside of the fact that against Olberg, he seemed just a little bit of a step behind from, like, a footwork perspective. And then the only other thing that I've seen from him from an aging perspective is just, it's the timing, right? It's the, not the timing of his strikes, but the ability to see the strikes coming at him, right? Because I think as you get older, you cannot stop the regression of your reaction time. And in this case, that's where I felt like Bogdan Guskov, being a crispy striker, that he could land a big shot and potentially, hurt Jan. And what do you know? Jan is off the bat just chewing up that lead leg. I mean, Bogdan Guskov's calf was like, it looked like it belonged to a different person at the end of this fight. Jan was piecing up that calf off the rip with those brutal leg kicks, but Bogdan Guskov ends up landing a big shot on Jan and drops him in round 2. But overall, the fight stays very competitive even after that, because Jan, Jan definitely loses round 2, but going into round 3, Jan comes out and Jan is blitzing Bogdan, landing shots, hurting Bogdan, ends up dropping Bogdan at some point. And ultimately, guys, this ends up in a draw. So, Jan Blachowicz, although 42, this guy is not going to let you just walk in there and just, take it from him dominantly. He is going to make you work for every second that you're in there. So you got to respect it. And I do think that the draw was the right decision here, because I think round 2, round 3, I think round 2 is easily Bogdan's. Round 3 is easily Jan's, but round 1 is a bit of a toss-up. But I can definitely see how this one becomes a draw. It's just unfortunate because Jan, just in his last few fights, right, he had the draw against Magomedov. And the last win that Jan got was the win over Alexander Rakic, but that win came by way of Rakic getting injured, right? So just, it's unfortunate for Jan, because even against Alex Pereira, some people believe Jan won that fight, right? And then so that's a split decision. And then also you have I think it was a unanimous decision for Olberg, but people felt like Jan did more than Olberg, like, because Olberg really was just landing those pop shots. So overall, guys, a fantastic performance from both guys, and you love to see Jan just continuously staying on top of the game here at 42 years of age. He's making 42 look like the new 32. So shout out to Jan Blachowicz. What a legend. Love that guy. Bogdan Guskov, one of my favorites as well. Also, one of the funniest things I saw, guys, after Maycee Barber, I think it was Maycee Barber, after she weighed in, she walked past like Bogdan Guskov. She had like a bikini on or some shit, and Bogdan Guskov just totally gets caught staring at her ass like as she walks past. There's a picture of it. So shout out to Bogdan Guskov. I guess he's a man of the culture. Fight number 11, we've got Triple C Henry Cejudo coming out for his last performance as a mixed martial artist, probably, but especially in the UFC. And he comes up against Peyton Talbot, who is one of the most talented prospects, guys. Like, Peyton Talbot is brutal from start to finish. The way that he is able to string together combos, he's got really significant one-shot power. And off the bat, guys, what do we see in this fight? Peyton Talbot lands a big shot on Henry off the rip, hurts him. Really, Peyton Talbot, guys, just looked fantastic. He's striking all over the place, throwing knees, throwing really hard straights down the pike, and landing right on the face of Henry Cejudo. But Henry Cejudo showed off that Mexican warrior spirit, did not back down from the fight whatsoever. Even when he was hurt, continued to land. And what do we see also? Peyton Talbot take down the Olympic champion Henry Cejudo, not once, but twice. And what's really interesting here, too, is that, Henry Cejudo had talked about this week how he would have Peyton Talbot actually come and stay at his house and was like a mentor to him. And so you have to give Henry a lot more props, too, that he even took this fight, because some fighters might be like, you know what, I'm not going to fight somebody who I was like a mentor for. Henry Cejudo said, let's fucking go. Let's get it. And they went out there and scrapped. And what a fun fight this was, guys. From start to finish, you had, Peyton Talbot landing the bigger, more significant strikes, but Henry Cejudo still landing on Peyton Talbot, getting a couple takedowns of his own. Just a solid back and forth performance, but I feel like the entire time Peyton Talbot was really in control of the fight, not only from a pace perspective, but also just if you're looking at damage. I think Peyton Talbot just had one up on Henry Cejudo in this one, and you can't blame Henry, 38 years old, but still being able to go up and go the full distance with a killer like Peyton Talbot. I just have so much respect for Henry Cejudo, guys. You got to give him his respect. Shout out to Triple C, and I hope that he has nothing but the best retirement with his family. Henry, if you ever watch this, I'm in Phoenix, so would love to come and film some stuff for you if you ever need it, man. Shout out to Triple C, and shout out to Peyton Talbot. Now he's going to probably be the number 10 ranked bantamweight in the world come Tuesday. So we'll see what happens with the rankings there. Peyton Talbot's on his way to potentially finding a title shot in the near future. So a very fun performance from him, and we'll see what happens in 2026 for his matchups. Fight number 12, guys. Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. This was a very fun fight as well. I would say a bit of an unfortunate ending here. And it's sad to see because Brandon Moreno never been finished before, but he loses by way of referee stoppage, KO, TKO in round 2. But round 1, Brandon Moreno's looking slick on the feet. That doesn't look like Tatsuro Taira was able to really land at all. Like when he was throwing those straights, Brandon Moreno's boxing style, I don't even know what it's like. It could be a Mexican-inspired boxing style, but he's so elusive when he's not only just at range with the boxing, but even in the pocket, just so elusive. And it looked like Tatsuro Taira was missing quite a bit. Brandon Moreno was slicker on the feet, in my opinion. But then they get into a takedown situation where Brandon is able to not only kind of sprawl, really good sprawls from Brandon, especially in round 1, but he's not only able to sprawl, but he ends up getting into a bit of like a triangle position off of the one scramble and gets Tatsuro Taira locked up in a very tight triangle that Tatsuro Taira is able to stay safe from, but Brandon Moreno completely controls round 1, gets the easy round 1 win, in my opinion, if you're just going round by round. Round 2, though, things kind of fall apart there. They get into a similar exchange where Tatsuro Taira is able to get Brandon to the ground, gets back control for a bit. And then suddenly, he starts raining down those ground and pound shots, which Tatsuro Taira has a very strong ground game, guys, and he really shows off his ability to finish guys on the ground with the ground and pound punches. But he lands some big shots on Brandon, but guys, Brandon, in my opinion, was still there. I do think that Tatsuro Taira was landing quite a bit, so I'm not like super pissed about the stoppage, but at the same time, I feel like what's unfortunate is although he's landing big, right after the ref stops it, Brandon just looks at the ref and ends up just going, really? So like you have to take that into account and assume that he really wasn't that hurt, and you would like to see Brandon Moreno, especially a former two-time champion of this division, giving him a little bit more leeway. But it is what it is, guys. Still a dominant performance from Tatsuro Taira. Just the ability to get Brandon into that position, not an easy thing to do. But I still think Brandon Assassin Baby Moreno still had fight there, and I don't think he was out. I think he could have continued on. But it is what it is. Like, this shit happens, and you can't take it away from Tatsuro Taira. He did what he needed to do. So shout out to him, a big win over a legend of this division. And unfortunately for us, guys, that flyweight matchup is the preamble to what could have been one of the best fights we've seen in this division, Pantoja versus Joshua Van. Guys, I don't know about you. I know how the fight ended. Obviously, I'm not going to take away anything from Josh Van because Josh Van, he's the winner, right? Pantoja got injured, could not continue, so that is Joshua Van's victory. But let us all sit here and actually be honest about what happened in this fight. Although the fight lasted, 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, 26 seconds. Pantoja, in that 26 seconds, guys, looked like an absolute world beater. He was landing at will with big shots. He landed several big shots from what I saw on Van. And honestly, he did not seem at all worried about what was coming his way from Van. He was landing big shots, throws that head kick that, I got to rewatch it. A lot of people were saying, Van caught the head kick and then threw Pantoja. But if memory serves me correctly, I believe what actually happened is that Pantoja actually landed the head kick flush, like on the side of the head of Van, but then Van grabbed the foot afterwards. I don't think that he completely blocked that kick, but I got to go rewatch it. But overall, guys, Pantoja showed why he was that formidable champion in this division, and just unfortunately gets dropped after that head kick. Not dropped, but Van kind of pushes him down and lands wrong on his arm, and it just dislocates. One of the most, oh God, it was nasty to watch, man. It was rough to watch that one. Now, what was interesting is Dana White said in the post-fight presser that I guess it was his shoulder, which I think they have to look at the ligaments and stuff of his forearm, his elbow, but a little bit weird because to me it didn't look like the shoulder. But you know what? I got to say, Dominic Cruz is getting shit on for that tweet that he made. But if it in fact was the shoulder, maybe Dominic Cruz isn't dead wrong. The problem I have with Dominic Cruz's tweet, though, is that, like, Dom, there were still like 3.5 or 4 minutes left of this fight. How is Pantoja supposed to do anything with that fucking arm? His arm was like, it looked like you dropped a couple rod, it looked like you dropped like a rod or a pipe into a sock like that, and then like went like this. That is exactly how the arm looked. It was just kind of flailing around in there. So not sure what Pantoja is supposed to do if Van starts, jumping on him and then punching that arm potentially. Like, I don't really know how he's supposed to continue on. So I feel like it made sense that this fight got stopped there. It is a very sad situation, guys, because Pantoja, in my opinion, was on his way to making flyweight history if he won this and just continuing to cement his own legacy as a champion. So it's very sad. I do think based on, assuming Pantoja's got to get surgery or something for that arm, he could potentially be out for a long time. So it's likely that we're going to see Josh Van actually take on Tatsuro Taira before Pantoja can get back in there. The one thing that I absolutely will riot for is if Pantoja comes back and doesn't get an immediate title shot, then I will be pissed off, because if there's anyone who deserves it, it is Alexandre Pantoja. The guy has lapped this division, and he did not get beat convincingly by Van. I mean, in that fight, if I'm to score that fight before the injury, Pantoja's winning. Even though it was a short amount of time, he was winning in that short amount of time. So it's very hard for me to just sit there and be like, oh, Pantoja's going to have to fight someone else. Even if if he's out for a year, he should get an immediate title shot upon his return. I'm very hopeful he'll be able to come back a lot sooner than that. So shout out to Pantoja. Keep your head up, champ. You'll be back. And shout out to Joshua Van, though, because he is going to be an active champion. I think that he's going to want to get back in there probably soon. So we'll see where that goes if he gets a matchup between Tatsuro Taira. And honestly, Joshua Van, I feel like he didn't look horrible against Pantoja off the rip, but it's still hard for me to determine where his ground game is at. And against a Tatsuro Taira, that could be a tough matchup for him, but I think it could be a very fun fight nonetheless. So we'll see what happens there. All right, guys, in the main event of the evening, we got Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan. Man, what a fight, guys. Petr Yan looked fucking unstoppable against Merab in this matchup. I mean, he brought he came out with that die machine motto, right? He wanted to end the machine. And guys, I think Merab looked great off the rip. Merab was landing some big shots in the boxing. But one thing that I thought right off the bat is Merab was landing those big shots, but I'm like, guys, Petr Yan is such a master, literally a master of boxing, right? So I knew it was just going to take a moment for Petr to kind of download the things that Merab's thrown at him. And I'm like, if Merab stays toe-to-toe with Petr the whole time and he doesn't start mixing in these takedowns, it's going to be a long night for Merab. And I think it wasn't until the kind of tail end of first round where we see Merab actually start to try to implement the wrestling, but he's just unable to get takedowns. I mean, I think he went officially 2 for 25 or something like that in takedowns. Petr Yan gets several takedowns over Merab, but Petr Yan just clipped Merab several times, hurt him to the nose, hurt him to the face, caught him with a straight where he wobbled him. And then, how can we forget the body kick where he throws that body kick and Merab just screams out loud? I mean, that is the funniest shit. You can't make it up. I mean, guys, it's such a sad thing because I was so excited for Merab to potentially, finally beat the bantamweight record, right? Because now we're in hell, right? We're in this, it's the 3-fight curse. So Merab has 3 defenses. Aljo had 3 defenses. Dominic Cruz had 3 defenses. So it's a multi-tie for the most defenses in the bantamweight division, which really just sucks. And Petr Yan plays spoiler on the night of. I do not think at the end of the day, guys, I don't think that Merab won a single round, in my opinion. I think it was close, maybe one of the rounds, but Petr just looked amazing from pillar to post. The way he was able to string together the combos, the way he was able to go to the body. He hurt Merab to the body with body kicks, body hooks. I mean, almost every shot, especially at the end of the fight, every shot Petr was landing to the body was making Merab wince or be hurt in some way. And what's really interesting, guys, is that I said right as round 4 started, to Marissa, I'm like, God, this is where Merab really starts to turn it on. And what do you know? Petr actually, I think, has a pretty dominant round 4 to a point where I'm like, holy shit, this is not going the way Merab could have ever anticipated. So what a way to shake things up at the end of 2025. And now we're going into 2026 with Nil Mirsi Petr Yan at the helm. And I think that is actually a fun thing because now this opens up a potential trilogy, which I believe Merab has more than earned, especially given that he actually went for 4 title defenses in 1 year. How do you not give one of the most active champions in Merab an immediate rematch for trying to get the gold back from Petr Yan? I think that it is much deserved that he should get that. But if Peter's able to get that one done too, now Peter's on track to have some really fun matchups. You still got Umar Nurmagomedov kind of in the wings here. He's going to be fighting Deiveson Figueiredo. I think that what they should do is try to book a Merab versus Peter in the first quarter if they can. I know that the UFC's already got a lot of those cards kind of figured out, but I still think if you can get Merab and Peter in the first quarter, so that way we can see how the Deiveson and Umar fight shakes out, that could make for a fun potential title matchup in the summertime, right? So if Merab ends up getting the title back from Petr Yan, now you have a fun setup for Petr Yan to either, if he beats Merab, now Peter faces Umar, or Merab, obviously if Umar beats Deiveson, that is. Obviously, I'm thinking that he will, but I think that you could set that title fight up right after, and it makes things pretty interesting for the bantamweight division. So you got to give Petr Yan all the props. The guy really went out there and just proved he is who he is, right? Like, Peter's always been one of the best fighters, but I feel like he had that stretch where things just didn't go his way. He got a couple losses in a row, but then he's picked it back up, got a win streak, found his way back to this title shot, and you got to give Merab all the props for taking another title shot in this calendar year. He didn't have to do that. So for anyone out there hating on Merab in any way, you need to really examine yourself, because Merab is an absolute dog. The way he was able, not only just wanted to put on an entertaining fight, like he could have tried to wrestle the whole time, which he did try to wrestle, but the way he actually really stood toe-to-toe with Yan was something to behold, and I got to give the guy respect, especially just going out there for 4 potential title defenses. I love to see activity like that as a fan, so shout out to Merab. I know he'll be back, but shout out to the new champ in No Mercy Petr Yan. Thank you guys so much for watching this. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to Fight Feed if you haven't already, so you can stay on top of all the new MMA content that I'll be posting. I just want to say thank you again. Happy holidays, everybody, and I will see you all in the next one.